Before talking about some of America's first gangs, it's important to give context to what brought many of these gang members here to America. Specifically New York City, since New York City would actually become the first place many of America's first gangs resided. In 1820, there was roughly about 123,000 people living in New York, with most of them living in Lower Manhattan below 14th Street. At the time, New York was a very peaceful place that didn't even have their own police force since it wasn't necessary at the time. This dynamic of a more peaceful New York would soon change in 1825 with the opening of the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal is a massive waterway that connects all the way through New York. Through the opening of the Erie Canal, New York would become a central hub for the transportation of goods. With a massive labor market being necessary to build the Erie Canal and other forms of transportation, many immigrants passing through New York at the time would fill these jobs and reside in New York. New York was beginning to grow so fast that the city's living conditions were unable to keep up with the rapid expansion in population. Examples being apartment tracts being sprung up on the streets, low amounts of sewers, and low amounts of safe drinking water. With such an overgrowing city unable to maintain cross-wide sanitation standards, gave birth to many medical and criminal outbreaks. The biggest group of immigrants to enter the United States during this time were the Irish. In an effort to maintain their ethnic heritage, many of the Irish immigrants began opening their own cheap grocery speakeasies through their neighborhood called the 5 Points. It was in this neighborhood where we would begin to see the official start of gang activity in America. The 5 Points resided in the Paradise Square district where 5 streets once intersected. The unsanitary conditions of the 5 Points led many of the middle-class citizens to leave, with many Irish immigrants occupying the area. The Irish would open many of their own green grocery stores as a result of many immigrants lacking the funds to buy from established markets. These stores would also be used as camouflage for stores that would also host gang-related activity. One of the many first owners of these stores was Rosanna Pierce. Among the various criminals to occupy her store would be America's first street gang called the 40 Thieves. The backroom of her store would become the main headquarters for the gang and was led by a man named Edward Coleman. The 40 Thieves would dominate the 5 Points area for over a decade until Coleman was arrested for murdering his wife. Numerous other gangs would form through these green grocery stores, such as the Roach Guards. One of the main objectives of the Roach Guards was to protect the liquor sellers of the 5 Points neighborhood. At one of the meetings of the Roach Guards, a dissident member of the gang threw a dead rabbit into the crowd. Why this is important to note is because in Irish culture, a dead rabbit is a sign to be fearful of a man. This dissident faction that the member came from would break apart from the Roach Guards, to eventually form their own gang known as the Dead Rabbits. The Roach Guards would become furious at this decision, declaring the Dead Rabbits as their main rival. The attire of the Dead Rabbits was a red stripe on their pants, with the initial leader Tom Walsh carrying an impaled dead rabbit on an object. Among the first street gangs in America were also the Plug Uglies, who were known as very large Irish men who were seen as some of the toughest gangsters of the 5 Points. Another gang were the Shirt Tails, known for wearing their shirts outside of their trousers, as well as wearing plug hats. Another area that created many street gangs was the Bowery. The Bowery was a slum area north of the 5 Points. In the Bowery, many young men worked as butchers throughout numerous slaughterhouses located in the area. A gang by the name of the Bowery Boys would often battle against the Dead Rabbits, and would even do so on historical grounds. These battles were so bad that not even local law enforcement or the National Guard at the time could even end them. In order for them to be ended, they would literally have to call in the army. As you would imagine, the press could no longer ignore the ongoing crime epidemic storming New York. By 1840, New York's total population had risen to over 300,000, almost triple the amount since the 1820s. What was once known as a peace haven was now infested with crime, with this new social issue beginning to spawn within other cities other than New York. Although this would become an ongoing issue outside of just New York would still continue to remain the central hub for America's profound gang activity for the remainder of the 19th century.